Technically speaking, what are the difference between the work activities financed in the various countries? So the difference is, I don't know, the size of the loan that you provide different in Africa than in Europe or in Asia?
Yeah. Well, at the moment, we as Mikro Kapital Group or Alternative Fund are not yet active in Africa, but I can tell you that we are currently looking at an opportunity to invest into a microfinance network in Africa. So my comparison is now drawn from current business in Central Asia and previous business of mine before I was with Mikro Kapital in Africa. From the sectors, it's quite similar. Agriculture usually is the leader. Services, often services around agriculture, and services around small industry, and then artisan business is in all of these regions the core activity from a sectoral point of view, plus local trading activities. Usually no activities with cross-border trading involved. The big differences come with loan sizes, where in Africa these do really reach from, let's say, $50 to several thousand, 3, 4, 5,000 US dollar, whereas in Central Asia, it usually starts at the $1,000 to $2,000 range, or maybe $1,000 range, and then going up to 10 or 20 on average, just because businesses are larger, even micro businesses are larger in Central Asia than they are in Africa, for example. Maybe there are some very specific cases in Africa worth mentioning. That is transportation, public transportation, availability of any public transportation is very limited in some regions. So motorcycle taxis or other support in mobility are a special feature of African microfinance, I should say. Again, Europe, as mentioned before, it's not so much about poverty alleviation or financial inclusion per se, but financial re-inclusion of those who dropped out the system, or it's about social enterprises, and eventually, if you take, for example, the case of Italy, which has a very good microfinance legislation, until recently, the upper loan amount for those microfinance institutions was 50,000 euros. Now it's lifted to 70,000 euro. And the main difference between microfinance and banking then is that these microfinance institutions have the advantage that they can get an 80% government guarantee on their portfolio in order to foster the segment, to support the segment. But of course, that's clearly above whatever you see in Africa or even in Central Asia.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Next question. It's a little bit personal, probably.
Okay.
Do you remember any particular episode typical of certain emerging countries regarding success achieved through micro capital financing?
Interesting. Yeah, I think there's two examples I'd like to talk about. One is also relates to my home country, which is Germany. We have a very successful woman entrepreneur in Romania, and actually she operates, and it sounds a bit crazy, maybe she operates 9 kindergartens by now. And how did this start? She was on a trip to Germany with her 2 kids, visiting her relatives. And as you know, there's a lot of Romanian community in Germany, as you probably know. And she noted the kindergarten concept, where in particular, single parents can have their children taken care of during the day and during the morning and to the early afternoon and go to work instead. And when she saw that concept, which also involves preschooling and really social care and group building and very good stuff, and my son was at kindergarten as well, benefited from it. And she noted that in Iași, the city in Romania where she lives and where the headquarters of our Mikro Kapital Romania actually is, it didn't exist there. And so she decided to open up the first kindergarten in Iași of that type herself based on a loan to buy and import equipment. So kind of a fixed asset loan from our Mikro Kapital Romania. And then she started working this, and the kindergarten, of course, parents have to pay, but it's a success story. And then with 3 more loans, she opened more kindergartens and operates them now in Romania. But today, she, I think, is kind of the owner or operator of 9 of these kindergartens. The second example, which I want to give you, starts a bit of at a sad starting point. It's about a family from Kyrgyzstan. The father, due to lack of higher education, had no chance basically to get a good opportunity job in his country, and moved him and his family to Armenia, where he worked as a construction worker, and the wife worked as a waitress. But they faced troubles in getting permanent work permits, official permissions to live in there. And then finally they decided to go home. So their first venture into improving their living conditions being to move abroad to try to build up an existence in another country of the so-called former Soviet Union, where they thought that cultural affinity would be great and fine. They failed on that, so they had to go home, back to Kyrgyzstan, and he started selling small horned cattle at the market, and still continue to work part-time on a construction site. But on that second business, the demand grew, and so he decided to buy the necessary tools to offer his services as an independent constructor, taking a loan from our on there. And additionally, working as an independent contractor, of course, he needed transport. He needed to offer his services not just in the area where he could walk to, but needed a van. And he financed this van from our company Mikro Leasing, and it took only 3 days until he became owner of that van. And with this van, he increasingly could offer his services, also driving there, transporting his material, and to basically reduce his expenses, because he didn't have to lease a car on a daily basis or organize transport with a taxi or whatsoever. Being successful then in the construction sphere, but also understanding what mobility means, he also started providing taxi services, which gave him additional income. So by and large, from being a small-scale farmer with the ability to do good work as a construction expert, he has built up a small enterprise consisting of offering construction services, offering mobility, offering transport services between the villages and the nearby city. And so a real little successful entrepreneurial career after a kind of failure in Armenia.